Imagine a bird that has been flying for 2 months straight. No landing, no swimming, just cutting through the clouds while the ocean taunts it hundreds of feet below. Now imagine that same bird survives by violently robbing its neighbors, sleeps with exactly half its brain turned off, and wears what looks like a deflated red dodgeball on its throat. Welcome to the frigatebird. This animal is technically categorized as a seabird, but there is a massive catch. If this seabird actually touches the sea, it will probably die. I know that sounds like a glitch in the Matrix. A seabird that drowns in the sea makes about as much sense as a submarine with screen doors. But I promise you, nature just min-maxed this animal's stats so hard it completely broke the basic rules of survival. To understand why this bird is so fundamentally broken, we have to look under the hood. Most standard issue seabirds, like ducks, penguins, or seagulls, come equipped with a little piece of hardware called a uropygial gland. It is an oil dispenser near their tail. They spread this oil all over themselves to make their feathers completely waterproof. Frigatebirds? Evolution stripped that part out. Their feathers have absolutely zero waterproofing. The ocean is literally lava to them. If a frigatebird sits on the water for more than a quick splash, its feathers act like a cheap paper towel. It turns into a soaked sponge, gets completely waterlogged, and sinks. To make matters worse, they have completely useless, tiny clown shoe feet that are barely webbed. They also have short little stump legs that cannot launch them off flat ground. So if they land on a flat beach or accidentally touch down in the ocean, they are functionally stranded and will drown. So why on earth would evolution make a seabird that cannot touch the sea, cannot walk on the sand, and cannot take off from the ground? Because it traded all of those basic survival skills to become the most ridiculously over-engineered flying machine on the planet. A frigatebird weighs about as much as a 2-liter bottle of soda. We are talking between 1 and 1.6 kilograms. But attached to that tiny body is a wingspan of up to 7.5 feet. It has the lowest wing loading ratio of almost any bird alive. Even its bones are hollowed out to the extreme. Its entire skeleton makes up only about 5% of its total body weight, which means its bones literally weigh less than its own feathers. It is essentially a living hang glider that accidentally grew a beak. But having the ultimate cheat code for flying brings up a massive problem. If you cannot float on the ocean and you cannot dive into it, how do you eat? Well, you choose violence. Frigatebirds practice a lifestyle called kleptoparasitism. In plain English, that means they are professional sky muggers. When a hardworking cousin of theirs, like a booby or a tern, catches a nice fish, the frigatebird shifts into high gear. It chases the victim down, grabs its tail feathers with a specially serrated beak, and shakes the absolute life out of it. It is a mid-air hostage situation. They will violently harass the other bird until the victim panics and throws up its half-digested fish. Then, the frigatebird swoops down and catches the vomit in mid-air before it hits the water. Christopher Columbus actually wrote about this in his 1492 journal. He basically filed a 500-year-old police report noting that this bird exists just to make other birds puke. Early European sailors hated them so much they named them after fast warships, calling them frigatebirds or man-o'-war birds because they behaved exactly like bloodthirsty pirates. But here's the craziest part about their pirate reputation. It is mostly a scam. Despite all the historical drama, modern studies on islands like Henderson Island show that stealing barf only accounts for about 5% of their daily energy needs. The vast majority of the time, they are catching their own food. But because they cannot land in the water, they outsource the actual hunting to other species. They fly high above the ocean and wait for predators like tuna or dolphins to start hunting below the surface. The big fish chase schools of flying fish and squid upward in a panic. When the flying fish break the surface to escape the tuna, the frigatebird just swoops down and plucks the fish right out of the air. They aren't Blackbeard, they are just using the ocean's version of Uber Eats. The tuna does the cooking, and the frigatebird intercepts the delivery. And they have plenty of time to wait for their food to jump out of the water, because they basically never land. I am not exaggerating. Scientists put GPS trackers on great frigatebirds and found they can stay airborne for up to 2 straight months. They can cross entire oceans without a single pit stop. To do this without exhausting themselves, they ride invisible thermal updrafts under storm clouds. They will purposefully fly into freezing cumulus clouds, climbing as high as 4,000 meters. That is over 13,000 feet in the air. Once they reach the top, they just glide back down for dozens of miles without flapping their wings a single time. This sheer refusal to touch the ground was actually hacked by ancient humans. Indigenous Polynesian navigators realized this bird's fatal flaw and turned it into a biological GPS app. They would keep tame frigatebirds on their boats. If the sailors were lost at sea, they just released the bird. Because the animal cannot rest on the water, it had absolutely no choice but to fly in a perfectly straight line toward the nearest dry land. All the sailors had to do was follow it. But spending all your time in the sky has massive risks. During hurricane season, frigatebirds often get sucked right into the eye of massive storms. Because they cannot land on the violent ocean, they just have to ride it out. Sometimes, the hurricane carries them hundreds of miles inland before spitting them out. Remember how I said they cannot take off from flat ground? After major storms, confused frigatebirds frequently wash up in random places like cornfields in Indiana or parking lots in Oklahoma. They just sit there on the pavement, the greatest flyers on planet Earth, completely defeated by asphalt. Now, if you are critically thinking right now, you might have realized a glaring plot hole. If you are flying day and night for 60 days straight, when do you sleep? This is where things get genuinely absurd. Researchers hooked up tiny brainwave monitors to these birds and discovered they literally sleep in the sky. But they do not just pass out and hope for the best. They sleep for a grand total of about 42 minutes a day, broken up into tiny 10-second micro naps. And they usually only turn off one half of their brain at a time. While they circle upward inside a warm air current, the open, awake eye always looks toward the inside of the turn so they can steer. The other half of the brain gets some shut-eye. They even enter deep REM sleep where their muscle tone drops and their head physically flops down, yet they keep gliding perfectly. They are quite literally asleep at the wheel. But do not think they are superhuman. The moment they finally touch down on land, they crash hard. They will sleep for over 12 hours a day to pay off their massive sleep debt. They are the ultimate college student pulling a 2-month all-nighter before collapsing into a coma. So they finally land on an island, usually in a tall bush or on a steep cliff edge so they can drop into flight. And why do they land? To make more weird little sky pirates. This brings us to the most visually disturbing part of the frigatebird experience. To attract a female, the male inflates a bare red sac on his throat, called a gular pouch. It takes 20 minutes of hard pumping to blow this thing up until it is bigger than his own head. He sits in a tree, looking like a giant, pulsing red balloon, drumming his beak against it and making a weird gurgling sound while the females shop around overhead. It is basically avian Tinder, but instead of holding a fish in your profile picture, your throat is an inflatable bouncy castle. And when mating season is over, that beautiful red pouch deflates into a wrinkled, pale, skin-colored sack that hangs loosely off his neck. I will not describe exactly what it looks like, but let's just say it is the reason every frat boy on a nature hike suddenly starts giggling. But the male's dedication to romance dies the absolute second the kid is born. Frigatebirds have one of the longest childhoods in the entire bird world. It takes over a year to teach a chick how to fly properly and how to snatch food without drowning. So what does the dad do? He bails. After about a month, he just pieces out, leaving the single mother to commute hundreds of miles every single day to feed this massive, screaming teenager entirely by herself. So why did nature build a bird with so many glaring flaws? Evolution is just a ruthless game of min-maxing your stats. 52 million years ago, the ancestor of the modern frigatebird lived near freshwater lakes in what is now Wyoming. We actually have the fossils of a bird called Limnofrigata. It had longer legs, a straighter beak, and could walk around like a completely normal bird. But over millions of years, nature offered it a terrifying trade. It asked the bird to give up the ability to walk, the ability to swim, and the safety of waterproof feathers. In exchange, it offered absolute mastery of the sky. The bird took the deal. It traded being decent at everything for being perfect at exactly one thing. And now, it is stuck in the sky. It is a seabird that can never touch the sea, surviving on stolen vomit, outsourced fishing, and 10-second naps. But hey, at least they didn't evolve to become entirely useless outside of a human being's living room. Which is exactly what happened to the modern pug. Though we will save that disaster of selective breeding for next time.